over 600,000 dead, a body count higher than all other American wars combined up until Vietnam. This is the American Civil War. By 1860, the United States was effectively two separate nations trapped under one flag. In the North, massive factories and sprawling railroads pointed toward an industrial future. Down South, the entire economy ran on a single cash crop, cotton, an empire powered entirely by the forced labor of 4 million enslaved people. This tension finally shattered when a self-taught lawyer won the presidency. Abraham Lincoln didn't grow up sipping tea on fine china. He came from mud and timber in the Kentucky backwoods. And because he openly opposed the expansion of slavery, Southern states refused to even wait for his inauguration. Before he unpacked his bags, they started seceding. For decades, politicians had slapped weak compromises and legal band-aids on the slavery debate. Now, the tape had failed. The country was tearing itself apart, and its survival rested on a dirt-poor outsider who had absolutely zero experience running a war. At first, Lincoln tried to thread the needle. When rebel forces surrounded a federal island outpost called Fort Sumter, he refused to send guns or ammo, opting to dispatch only food in hopes the South would ignore it. The Confederates opened fire anyway. Miraculously, no one died during the 34-hour bombardment, but the message was clear. People initially assumed it would be a quick, almost festive dispute. When Union troops marched out for the first major clash at Bull Run, civilians literally packed picnic baskets and rode carriages out from Washington, D.C. to watch the show. Hours later, those same carriages were causing massive traffic jams as terrified Union soldiers retreated in a total bloody panic. The chaos of Bull Run revealed a massive problem for the North. When Virginia seceded, it handed the Confederacy its most lethal asset, Robert E. Lee. Lincoln had actually offered Lee command of the Union Army, but Lee chose to fight for his home state, giving the South one of the sharpest tactical minds in history. The North had the booming factories, thousands of miles of train tracks, and a massive advantage in sheer manpower. But without a commander who knew how to use them, the Union was just feeding young men into a strategic meat grinder. Lincoln's first answer to Lee was General George McClellan. Young and brilliant, McClellan thought of himself as a second Napoleon, but he carried a fatal flaw. He despised taking risks. If the weather wasn't pristine and he didn't outnumber the enemy 2-1, his army simply wouldn't move. This hesitance reached its tragic peak at Antietam. Union soldiers actually stumbled upon Lee's exact battle plans, wrapped around some cigars. McClellan held the enemy playbook in his hands, yet he still dragged his feet. The resulting clash yielded 23,000 casualties in a matter of hours. And despite the horrific cost, McClellan let Lee's battered army escape. We can see Lincoln's frustration turning into political action in this document. Tired of waiting for a strictly military victory, he drafted the Emancipation Proclamation. By legally freeing enslaved people in rebel-held territory, Lincoln accomplished two massive strategic goals at once. He made it politically toxic for European powers like Britain and France to support the South, and he opened the door for nearly 200,000 black men to pick up rifles and join the Union ranks. The objective of the fighting had shifted entirely. Union soldiers were no longer marching south simply to enforce a border dispute or put down a localized rebellion. They were now fighting to completely dismantle the institution of slavery. Lee, needing a decisive victory to break Northern morale, pushed 75,000 men up into Pennsylvania. They collided with a desperate Union army near a quiet crossroads town called Gettysburg, triggering a massive 3-day struggle. It devolved into vicious hand-to-hand combat among the boulders and hills. On the third day, Lee rolled the dice, sending 12,000 men marching directly into the center of the Union guns. The failed charge left thousands dead on the grass, effectively breaking the Confederacy's offensive capability forever. While Lee was suffering his worst defeat in the East, a very different story was unfolding 900 miles away. Lincoln was watching a quiet, cigar-chewing general named Ulysses S. Grant tear through Tennessee. Grant didn't care about perfect odds. Trying to capture Vicksburg, the last rebel stronghold on the Mississippi River, he ordered an insanely risky maneuver. At 2 a.m, he sent Union gunboats sneaking right past the massive Confederate shore batteries in the pitch black. The gamble worked, allowing Grant to trap the city. With Gettysburg secured and the Mississippi River conquered on the very same weekend, the entire trajectory of the war flipped. Lincoln promoted Grant to command all Union armies. He had finally found his finisher. Grant locked on to Lee in Virginia and refused to let go. Unlike previous generals who retreated to lick their wounds after taking heavy losses, Grant just kept marching south, initiating brutal, continuous assaults. Northern newspapers called him the Butcher, but Lincoln refused to fire him, simply stating, "He fights." Meanwhile, Grant unleashed General William T. Sherman in the Deep South to execute a strategy of total war. Sherman believed the only way to end the conflict was to completely break the psychological will of the Southern people. He marched an army 60 miles wide, straight across Georgia. They ripped up train tracks, torched factories, and liberated thousands of enslaved people along the way. This scorched earth approach eventually forced the Confederate government to abandon its capital, burning their own warehouses to keep supplies out of Union hands and leaving Richmond a skeletal ruin. The era of polite, localized battles was dead. To preserve the Republic, the Union command realized they had to grind the Southern war machine into absolute dust. Starving, out of ammo, and completely surrounded by Grant's forces, Lee finally ran out of options. In April 1865, the two commanders met inside a quiet red brick house in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia, to arrange the surrender. Instead of demanding harsh punishments, Grant offered surprising grace. He ordered 25,000 rations sent to Lee's starving men. Officers kept their sidearms, soldiers kept their horses, and everyone was permitted to go home. There would be no executions and no treason trials. The healing had to begin immediately. The nation wouldn't get to celebrate for long. Just 5 days after securing the country's survival, Abraham Lincoln attended a play at Ford's Theater. A Confederate sympathizer slipped into the presidential box and shot him in the back of the head. The bloodiest chapter in American history cost over 600,000 lives, and the president who guided them through it. But out of that incredible destruction, the chains of 4 million people were broken, giving the United States a hard-fought second chance to finally live up to its founding ideals.